Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is in fact the Talamanca Review. It's 10:30 p.m. exactly my time, Wednesday the 2nd of July. And I'm here in the Talamanca Mountains, and I'm contemplating what I put you poor folks through on the Talamanca Review. And I know it's a lot, but somebody has to do the big boy shows, okay? Because we're in a lot of trouble. And I don't know about you folks, but I would always prefer to know, right? Always prefer to know what's going on rather than to live blind. I think it's the only dignity we have. Now, I've gotten really good at these, what I would call multi-part podcasts. I think the first really big one I did was the womb inseminated by Solomon. And the culture of Solomon is the secret societies, okay? It's got nothing really to do with Judaism. I don't think he even ever existed. Yeah, I think he's part of Jewish mythology. I don't think there was a first temple. I agree with Jordan Maxwell on this. But the body of information is nonetheless extremely important because it forms the axis upon which a great intergenerational plan has been operating. Intergenerational and interdimensional plan. Okay? So, I have one more part to do in this trilogy, but as is my custom, I don't like to do them all at the same time, right? I like to take a little break once in a while. So we'll do decimation maybe tomorrow night. I don't think there's any great suspense about what that one's going to be about. You can look it up if you want beforehand. What is decimation? Look up the etymology of the word. If you are dying to watch that podcast. Tonight I'm going to talk a little bit more about how this plan is being executed and the various faces of it, because it has many faces. It's a many-faced, many-headed beast. It's a hydra, okay? A many-headed beast. And its principal characteristic is distraction. And it leverages itself. The distraction is important because, as is the custom of the magician, when the trick is being done with the left hand, the magician prefers that you be concentrating or focusing on the right hand. So you're not looking at the left hand, you're not seeing what the left hand is doing. I'm not trying to be symbolic in my utility of left and right there. I'm not talking about something else. I have to be clear about that sometimes. Just a simple, little, straightforward example of what I mean. Now, I can't stress this enough. You're going to understand the Talamanca Review much better if you read my books. And yes, I am trying to sell books. I don't mean to be a weasel, but a writer writes books to sell books. And I haven't had any bad feedback yet. I haven't had anybody who's regretted reading the books yet. I haven't had anybody who's regretted spending money on them. And as I say to all of you who listen to the Talamanca Review, if you are, like many other people are right now, in a difficult time with money, then just reach out to me and I will give you digital copies of the books, what the kids call an EPUB, an electronic publication. And you can read it on your favorite tablet, and you can, or Kindle, or whatever it is that you like to read with. And that's there's 4 books for the offering there. And for those of you who've enjoyed my books, my nonfiction, you should venture into the nonfiction, the fiction, because you can really see how I've been remarkably consistent for like 25 years now. My message and my perception have been the same for 25 years now. The nonfiction is just the refinement of the fiction and the migration of it into a nonfiction format. So you can read God is an Economist, which is a beautiful book. And you can read The Stolen Child, which is also a very revealing book. And of course, that helps me out. And that allows me to make a little bit of money and have more time to podcast and so on and so forth, okay? And I really hate having to do this, but it's the world we live in, right? Everybody's selling something. But I will say this, what I'm selling is genuine. I'm selling you something that is really important for you. I'm selling you books that you should actually read. And The Devil in Us is really turning out to be the most uncannily accurate one, okay? And I see a lot of people out there circling around this idea, but they can't quite get it. And the reason they can't quite get it is that you need to come at this from the unification of 2 or 3 different perspectives. So there's a normal chronological history to it, which I express in The Devil in Us. There is the perspective of intent, which is the hardest to convey to a reader, because I have to suppose what people are doing. And the only way I can defend my suppositions is if the assumed intent is proven out in the timeline. And the way you do that is, that's a very easy one, actually. I'll give you a very, very simple way of understanding that right away. So, when you look at the major movements in history, and I'm talking about how we function collectively here, our individual lives are different. Our individual lives are susceptible to more variables than the collective existence. The collective existence is your society, your template, your culture, and your tribe. You know, there's various concentric circles. And then I guess you could say it goes right out to the whole human race, but we haven't really learned to function as a human race yet. It's not really in us yet. We're still too primitive. And I will say, as I go through my thesis, I give due where due is deserved. I pay my dues where it is deserved, okay? Now, many of the things that the negative power centers in our society, which to my sensibilities are various offshoots of the Cabala. It's all the Cabala, okay? And the Kabbalistic circles within Judaism itself, and the spin-offs into various secret societies, mainly in Europe. I'm not sure what their reach is now. I mean, I'm starting to see evidence of them in the Middle East. I think that this guy going around claiming to be the either the last Mahdi or the herald of the last Mahdi. I think he started a religion called the Religion of Light and Peace. I think that's what I would describe as Kabbalistic Masonic magic entering into the Islamic world. I don't know why they haven't killed him yet. The Islamic world defends against magic more than any other. You can't get away with any shit in the Islamic world. They will just straight up kill you. I'm not saying that's right, and I'm not saying that's wrong. The detriment excuse me. The detriment of what they're doing is the inhibition of free will. Remember, the core rule down here is free will. Okay, and that's something that you really have to come to understand. Okay, because what it does is it abates judgment in you. Okay, so and judgment is very bad. Judgment is always a petition for experience, and you're always getting a karmic transfer when you judge somebody. Well, you may say to yourself, well, Bruce, how do we go about this world and, voice our opinions about many of the things we don't like? Well, I mean, you can do it in the normal way, I suppose. You can podcast, you can, I certainly give a few of my opinions. I mean, but if you listen to me carefully, I'm very, very adept at making a point without really insulting people and without really negating their free will right to self-expression. Okay? I will do it in ways like, why are there so many catamites in politics? And so really what I'm saying is we've become extremely imbalanced in the lower chakras, which are the satanic chakras, right? The genitals, the anus, the stomach. Those are the sort of the animalistic centers and the energy centers of the body that communicate very adeptly with the astral, because sex is a very strong astral communication. That's why there's so much sex magic. But I don't come right out and say, we should be throwing homosexuals off of buildings or anything like that, because they have a free will right to exist. And homosexuality does occur in nature. Okay, it occurs at a rate of about 1%, so 1 in 100. And so nature is like, you can't argue with nature. If nature does it, it can't be wrong. Nature is an expression of the divine. But what they're doing is they're amplifying that 1% to create a culture of perversion. Okay? And they're creating that culture of perversion. And I mean, let's be honest, they're doing the old Jew trick, right? Like, the victim becomes the hero, right? So in the 80s, they were beating us up in bathhouses, and now we're running cities. How we've come a long way, girls. And I will say quite definitively, I don't think sodomites or catamites make very good leaders. You want a leader that's focusing more on the higher chakras, the forehead, the crown, the heart center. That's where you want your leaders. You want their consciousness more elevated in their system. You don't want it focused on their asshole and their dick and their stomach. Or their vagina, if you're Madonna. I don't think anybody out there talks about sex the way I do. I don't know how I became adroit at this. It's kind of a mystery even to me. I just did. So Yeah, so we've come to be led by less than qualified people and people who don't really have any leadership capability, but they represent a highly stoked reactive energy. And by continually stoking that reactive energy, you get a bunch of morons who go out and vote, and they vote for this reaction, like, down with homophobia, down with it. Yeah, I agree with down with homophobia too. Okay, I agree with that as well, but I don't see any reason why we have to sabotage our legislatures and our budget to agree with down with homophobia. Can you explain that to me? I mean, what, are you fucking stupid? And that's another big problem now is people are really fucking stupid. And it's like 50, 60 years of television watching. People are unbelievably fucking stupid. Bob and I have noticed that the people up here who function at like a grade 8 education by Western standards, they're extremely common sense intelligent. They're like way more than the average North American. Way more. Right? So let's get back on track here. So distraction is the main thing. Okay? So what do I mean by this? Okay, so let's start to put it all together. I mean, I've done it on my podcasts already. I'm repeating a lot of the stuff, but every phrasing of it, every retelling of it, every new way of approaching it opens up more people. It's like the tumblers on their ability to open the safe in their consciousness and get the perception into them, get the realization into them. It's different with everybody. I never know what I'm going to say that's going to wake somebody up. Very, very fascinating process doing this podcast. I'll tell you that right now. It is absolutely fascinating to hear from people and to find out what affects them the most. I never in a million years would have been able to guess. Very fascinating process. So, okay, so let's start with the UFO narrative. All right, which I sort of came to a full understanding of when I wrote Stardust Ranch and everything that's going on. And I try to talk about it. What they've done with the UFO movement is they've literalized it into a physical manifestation. All right? And so the first ultra-terrestrial or extraterrestrial contact was made in the secret societies. And before that, it was made by the tribal peoples. So when human beings were less dangerous, and we're an extremely dangerous species now. You need to understand the degree to which we scare a lot of the extraterrestrial races now. Because we're going through this very, very weird phase that a lot of civilizations go through. Not all of them make it. There's no guarantee we're going to make it through this. It's like a leap in consciousness, okay? So the very first UFO or extraterrestrial contactees were probably the ceremonial magicians. Okay? I would suggest to you that you might want to rethink the language surrounding angel and demon. Okay? I would suggest to you that you might want to rethink what Enochian magic is. You might want to rethink what John Dee and Edward Kelly called angelic script. Okay? So it's always the same thing. Okay? To communicate with these ultra-terrestrials, extraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them, okay? It's always the same thing. There's a language by which you communicate with them. Okay? So there's a lot of sub-languages that have come up in the culture of Cabala. They call them ciphers and things like this. There's a guy you can take a look at. We briefly touched upon him in the interview I did with Ground Zero Radio with, I think his name was Olav. I forget his last name, Olav Wilson or something like that. But he was friends with a fellow named Alan Greenfield. And Greenfield is a kabbalist. And he will, talk about the magics and the workings and the ciphers that are used to communicate with the extraterrestrials and the ultra-terrestrials. Okay? So I would suspect that certain rabbinical circles have been doing this in an unbroken chain for 2,500, 3,000 years. Okay? So when you see someone like Stephen Greer and his disclosure project, don't see him as a scientist. Don't see him as an engineer. Don't see him as a whistleblower. The correct way to see Stephen Greer is as a kabbalist. Stephen Greer is a kabbalist. Now, what Stephen is doing is he's fossilizing the narrative. Okay? So the narrative is generally fluid. And by fluid, I mean it's largely an astral narrative. Now, I realize it's very difficult to understand anything I'm saying if you don't have a degree of awakened imagination. It must just sound like calculus or Greek to you. None of this really makes sense till you begin having object experiences with your consciousness, with your imagination. When you start getting your own data. Because absent the data, you have no context to understand what I'm talking about. Okay? So this is why most of the people who understand what's going on with UFOs are metaphysical and esoteric and occult people. Because that's where most of the phenomenon is happening. Now, in many of my podcasts in the past, I've talked a lot about agency. How human beings are the agents of what happens in this realm. And this has been set up by God, and nobody will go against God. And here God could mean the ruler of the fourth dimension. I'm not talking about the absolute creator, but more just the potentate that runs the fourth dimension. Okay? So that's what God is in this context. So there's rules to domains and realms. So we have physical rules that we live by in the physical world. Very simple to understand. If you jump out of a tree, you're going to fall to the ground. It's called gravity, physical law. Okay? There are rules and laws for the fourth dimension. It's a governed, all realities are governed, by the way. They're all governed. Everything in creation is governed. Okay? And then there's a set of rules for interacting between dimensions. So if you're going to start going into the fourth dimension, the astral, as an astral traveler, as a remote viewer, or one of these agnostic methodologies of exploration. I say agnostic because they're not rooted in a creative process or the pursuit of harmony with the Creator, which is the religious and spiritual principle, which is the mindset and the heart set that I travel in. So when I sit down and I meditate and I may or I may not go on a journey of consciousness, all of my journeys are pivoting off of the intent that I want to know the Creator and I want to be of service to the Creator, and that I think this is the highest expression of a human life. Okay? And I do it in a loving way. And this is why my practice is religious or spiritual, or both, however you want to look at it. There's a number of agnostic practitioners out there, and this is why I refer to myself as a transcendent practitioner. Okay, because my goal is the transcendent union with the Creator. Not hard to understand, right? Now, when you operate in this way, you don't really have any worries. Nothing is going to hurt you. Nothing is going to roll you, rob you, violate you, anything like that. And what happens is you start to learn things. Okay? You start to learn a lot of things. I would say most of the religions on the planet that have not gone beyond the fourth dimension are controlled by the reptilians. And that would include the Sufis as well. I haven't shared this with you, but I've come to the realization, some 16, 17 years after my very disturbing encounter with the Turkish Sufis in the West End of Toronto, that this is entirely reptilian. Okay? And there's reasons, I won't go into it tonight, but it was sort of given to me, you could say, as a realization. It was given to me. Okay? And again, that's fine too. You're allowed to do whatever you want to do, because remember, it's more circular down here than it is linear. Okay? Everybody in the Abrahamic system thinks in a very linear way. Birth, death, hell, heaven. So it's, the line is lateral or horizontal when you're physically alive. And then when you die, it's vertical. And you're either going up or you're going down. But it's all directional. The actual reality down here is circular. It's like an endless gerbil wheel. And we refer to an old soul as somebody who just wants to get off the gerbil wheel. And to get off the gerbil wheel, you have to surrender judgment. Not your judgment. I'm not saying don't give prudent foresight to your investments and what you do with your time and things like this, but you have to understand that everybody is on their own circle and they're learning things, and even the darkest stuff on the planet. Okay, they're learning things. And those very, very dark circles are coming to an end now. There's, I think, an epic battle coming, and it's all going to be brought to an end. Alrighty. Okay. let's get back to it. Did I lose some volume there? Oh, how did that happen? There we go. Okay, so we're just going to go over this a little bit, okay? And so I guess I'll do the material first. So in the Kabbalah, there are multiple worlds and dimensions, okay? There's the Sephirotan worlds, and a complex system of 10 divine emanations is what they call them, and various worlds. They're not physical planets, but rather distinct spiritual and metaphysical realms that constitute the totality of existence, from the most abstract divine essence to the physical world we inhabit. And these worlds are often understood as interpenetrating dimensions, each with its own laws and inhabitants. Okay, so that's a very interesting and evolved idea in Western theology. You can see why the Cabala is the basis of what we'd call Western metaphysics, and I suppose you could even call it a Western yoga. Very, very interesting and well-defined document. So there's angels and spiritual beings. There's categories of spiritual beings, malachim, angels. They're not necessarily physical, but rather forces or intelligences that carry out divine will and can manifest in different forms. Some ancient texts, like Ezekiel's vision of the Merkava, the chariot, which is a foundational text for a school of Kabbalistic thought called Merkava mysticism, describe beings and phenomenon that have been compared to modern UFO sightings. Now, there are other inhabited earths in the Kabbalah, and some Kabbalistic and Midrashic texts mention 7 earths, or other inhabited worlds. And now, while some traditional interpretations explain these as continents or different aspects of our own world, some Kabbalists, like Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, suggest they refer to genuinely distinct, inhabited realms, potentially with intelligent creatures different from humans. And this doesn't necessarily mean aliens as we conceive them, but rather other forms of intelligent life created by God. So there's a limitless creation. A core tenet of Judaism is the limitless power of God, and many Jewish scholars and Kabbalists argue that limiting God's creative power to only one inhabited planet would be a theological constraint. And I'm inclined to agree with that. Therefore, the existence of life elsewhere is not only possible, but for some a logical extension of an infinite creator. But remember, we're not necessarily talking about extraterrestrials yet, the way Stephen Greer is. But believe me when I tell you, Stephen Greer is a Kabbalist. Okay? So what Stephen Greer is, he's actually operating as a rabbi. He's extending the Kabbalistic ideology into a more cast and formed and literalized interpretation of what has largely been, in many ways, just sort of conceptual and metaphysically theoretical, okay? Up until they started making contact with the magic, which I'm not sure when that was, when I imagine, well, if in the Solomonic era they were able to interact with the demonic realm, which is one of the first realms you interact with if you start exploring. And one of the reasons you interact with the demonic first is that it's very close to the physical. Okay? So, interdimensional phenomenon. Kabbalistic thought inherently deals with interdimensional concepts through its emphasis of the interconnectedness of all worlds and Sephiroth. Events in one realm can influence others. And spiritual practices like prayer, meditation, or studying Torah are seen as ways to interact with and draw down influence from higher dimensions. I largely agree with that, by the way. Now, the idea of hidden or unseen realities is central to Cabala, and these aren't necessarily physical dimensions in the scientific sense, but rather layers of reality that are not perceptible to our ordinary senses, but are nonetheless real and impactful. All right, so ciphers used in Cabala. Cabala heavily relies on specific interpretive methods, often referred to as ciphers or hermeneutic techniques, to uncover deeper esoteric meanings within sacred texts, particularly the Torah. And these methods are believed to reveal the hidden wisdom of God's creation. The three primary ciphers are gematria, and this is the most well-known Kabbalistic cipher. Each Hebrew letter has a numerical value. Gematria involves adding up the numerical values of letters in words, phrases, or verses. Okay? Now, very often when you get into this stuff, and the same thing existed in Palo Mayombe as well. It exists in Santeria. It exists in Voodoo. And a lot of the very astral religions, they have a language for communicating with the other side. And very often the language is a form of a cipher or it's sigils. And sigils are, hang on a sec. Sigils are integral to the Cabala as well. Sigil definition. An inscribed or painted symbol considered to have magical power. Okay, so there you go. So the purpose of gematria is that words or phrases with the same numerical value share a hidden connection or deeper meaning. For example, the Hebrew word for love and one both have a gematria of 13. Suggesting a profound link between the concepts of love and unity. Similarly, the numerical value of the tetragrammaton, God's four-letter name, is 26, which is 2 times 13, reinforcing the idea of divine unity and love. Notaricon is the second means of cipher, okay? Notaricon. And this method involves deriving a word from the initial or final letters of a series of words, or conversely, expanding a word into a series of words where each letter stands for a different word. It's akin to creating acronyms or backronyms. Notaricon is used to reveal hidden names of God, divine attributes, or to condense complex ideas into a single word or phrase. A famous example is the Kabbalistic name of God, Agla, which is a Notaricon for Ata Gibor Liolam Adonai. You, O Lord, are mighty forever. And the third method of cipher in the Cabala is Temura, and it involves rearranging letters within a word or phrase to form new words. It's essentially a form of anagram, and there are different types of Temura. And so, again, they're playing with the idea of the ironic mirror, okay? They're trying to, and I think this is stupid, and I think you can go too far with this stuff, and I think it's really like low-level, nonsensical stuff, to be honest with you, okay? No offense to the rabbis. So there are 3 types of Temura. Atbash, and this is where the first letter of the alphabet is replaced with the last, the second with the second to last, and so on. Albam, the alphabet is divided into two equal halves, and letters from the first half are replaced with corresponding letters from the second half. And Avgad, each letter is replaced by the letter immediately following it in the alphabet. And the purpose, Temura is used to uncover alternative meanings, hidden messages, or symbolic connections within the text by demonstrating that seemingly disparate words can be related through letter permutations. So these ciphers are not mere intellectual exercises, but are seen as tools for spiritual insight, enabling Cabalists to access deeper layers of divine wisdom embedded within the Hebrew language and the sacred texts. And they believe that by manipulating letters and numbers, they can tap into the underlying structure of creation and gain a closer understanding of the divine. That's the theory, anyways. So why do I call Stephen Greer a Kabbalist? Because the entire UFO phenomenon, as we understand it, is more about coming into contact with these other realms than it is with other planets or star systems. Now, the time-space location of a star system in the universe may correspond to the location of the realm that the people or beings that we're dealing with come from, but it doesn't necessarily mean they come from a planet or a star system in that region. It's I would say it's closer to quantum entanglement, where everything is just a millisecond apart from everything else, even if the physical distance is a trillion light years. There's this interconnectivity at the various levels of dimensionality to the universe where everything is sort of connected. Now, the question is, did they know this when they detonated the atomic bombs? Did they know this? Did they have any idea that this would have this effect on the corresponding realms around us? Because this is when what we'll call the Kabbalistic age comes into full view of everybody. And this is when we start to see the Jewish global dominance, whether it be Henry Kissinger starting the secret, again, another Kabbalist, Henry Kissinger, okay, starting the secret space program, right, from World War II. All of the people working on the bomb were Jews in Los Alamos, Jewish physicists, and this is the migration of Kabbalistic thought into the sciences, because the Jewish system is one of materialization. Everything has to be materialized. It's a very material, very heavy spiritual system. They might be offended by my saying that, but it is true. You can learn to uncover truth and go to very high regions of reality and engage the divine. And you do have the right to ask for proof, and you will get that proof, but the proof will be for you and you alone, and you will not disturb the evolving consciousness of other sentient beings on this planet, your fellow human beings, who may not be ready to live in the reality that you live in. But because of the idea of domination, which is central to Jewish theology, domination of non-Jews, and that is not an anti-Semitic idea, it's plainly in view from pretty much every public-facing rabbi, from liberal and reform to Orthodox, who's taken up digital voice on YouTube or Odyssey or BitChute or Substack or wherever. I don't think we can really pretend this isn't the case anymore, that Judaism is a theology of domination, okay? And this is why it has to materialize. Now, God has limits on the degree to which you can materialize outside of balance with the existing life forms on the planet, which brings us to our present chaos. I hope I'm being clear. I mean, this is like pretty straightforward for me, but that doesn't mean it's going to be straightforward for everybody else. So, what I wanted to accomplish tonight was basically to talk about the UFO phenomenon and explain to you that this is nothing new. And so at the level of high ceremonial magic and Cabalistic and Rosicrucian investigation into other dimensions, they've been engaging non-human life for centuries, the high initiates of these paths. And as you know, just by your friend here, Bruce, who does the Talamanca Review, anybody who practices internal cultivation will at some point in their journey, if they keep it up, cross paths with ultra-dimensional life or extraterrestrial life or whatever you want to call it. Okay? It's all out there. It's all being mapped now. There's a kind of a cartography to it. I'm not a huge... I don't think it's as big a deal as other people. Some people, they live and die on that UFO hill. I just think it's another dimension of life. Not really anything to get too worried about. I don't think the Creator makes any mistakes, and I think that if you're born into a human life, your main concern is being a good human being, not dedicating thousands of hours to trying to figure out or validate whether there's life on other planets. It's just fucking stupid. All right? And a lot of people get lost in these worlds. There's a lot of these worlds now in the 21st century. These Dungeon and Dragon disappear worlds. So, this is part of the chaos we're living in now. Now, this is where it gets a bit spooky. Much of the defilement and the desecration that I've described in the 2 previous podcasts are accomplished with ceremonial magic, and they are accomplished with the secret societies as the human agents, allowing the ultra-dimensional forces to work through them. Okay? So this is another thing that's going on that nobody... And that is the clearest sentence I can give you on Stephen Greer. Okay? Stephen Greer represents Kabbalistic ultra-dimensional forces. There's nothing fucking extraterrestrial about what he's talking about. Okay? And he knows it. Okay? Which makes him a liar and a propagandist and a deceiver, which is completely in line with the war by deception that our Hebrew friends seem to be fully committed to now, right? And this is just another front on it. The UFO stuff is just another front, okay? These orbs and these things you see, it's really no big deal, okay? Orbs are no big deal. You can learn to call orbs in fairly easily. It's not really high esoteric art, but generally, these extra-dimensional forces are often seen at times of cataclysm. And the defilement and the desecration we're in now is leading us towards the cataclysm out of which the world to come will be built, which is the Kabbalistic Jewish vision. Okay? So kill all the people on the planet, build a new world. Sounds like Dr. Evil out of an Austin Powers movie, but it literally is Jewish theology. Okay? Now, I don't think they're entirely alone. I think that the Vatican is very much working with them now and in on this. The Cardinal of Colleges, certainly the Jesuits, and I think it's mainly restricted to, in a public-facing way, those 2 groups. Okay, the Vatican and the Sanhedrin, and then there's a bunch of supporting groups around them, which are steeped in this ceremonial magic, secret society, fourth dimensional fucking nonsense, which is ridiculous. It's all just ridiculous. Anyways, yeah, I'm gonna call this one, I think Stephen Greer is a Cabalist. So I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Telemaker Review.